In 2018, one political analyst predicted the blue wave of the midterm elections before ballots were even cast. That same analyst has now written a new Republic article about the 2020 election. According to surveys cited in the article, 71% of Republicans and 55% of Democrats now regard the opposition party as a force leading to national decline. Rachel Bitecofer is the author, joins me now from Washington. She's an election forecaster, analyst, and senior fellow at the Niskanen Center in Washington, D.C. So, Rachel, as I mentioned, you successfully predicted the blue wave in our last midterm election. Why were you able to see this election leaning this way, and what do you see for the 2020 elections?
Predominantly, the reason I was able to see it coming is I understood that 2016 had kind of caught Democrats and left-leaning independents sleeping. They had been complacent in a lot of places where they had number advantages, having been in power for a long time. And, the election had been pretty intense between Bernie Sanders and Clinton. And Clinton, of course, had public relation problems by the time the election came around. And I just knew that the, demographic muscle had never been flexed in a lot of places, and that once Trump was elected, we were really going to see a profound change in the electorate. You write about something called a negative partnership. What does that mean? Can you break that down for us? And how did it factor in to the 2018 midterm election? Yeah, so negative partisanship refers to feelings of angst, apathy, even hate that people feel when they think about the other party, the other party's politicians, and the other party's issue positions and ideological preferences. And that motivates people, even if they don't necessarily know it, to show up to vote. And so when we looked at how Republicans behaved during the Obama years, they were super motivated to vote. We saw the Tea Party, groups emerge right after Obama was elected. And we've seen very similar backlash to Trump's election with the resistance, so-called resistance movement. So it's this idea of getting really galvanized to vote once you're out of power. How exactly was President Trump able to tap into negative partisanship and use that as a campaign strategy in 2016? Yeah, that was the most fascinating finding from 2018. So this is a new theory that I have designed, and I piloted in 2017 and 2018. And 2017, I didn't see this so much in Virginia, but in 2018, I had expected that Republicans would do what Democrats had done over the Obama years and kind of pull back their participation once they had control of all three branches of government. But that's not what we saw, actually. In 2018, we saw Republican turnout very, very strong, even though it wasn't strong enough to fend off the blue wave in the House. And the reason is that Donald Trump and the Republican Party has found a way to artificially basically inflame negative partisanship in the way that they conduct their electoral strategy, and especially in the way that Donald Trump handles himself. If you've noticed the way his rhetoric and behavior is, he's always castigating the Democratic Party as an enemy and really firing up his base to vote. 2020 candidates are fighting for independent voters, but really, how many independent voters are out there and up for grabs? So that's a really important point. My research does not argue that there's no such thing as an independent voter, but it does correct the public's misperception of how many there are. Political scientists have long known that only about 10 to 7% of people are truly independent because they don't lean to one party or the other. The leaners are basically closet partisans. And then what's my research is innovation is talking about is a different kind of swing of independence. So we know that those pure independents might move from Obama to Trump, but what we've been ignoring for a long time in the polarized era especially is that there's a different independent swing, and that's their decision to show up to vote or not. And we saw this massive turnout surge of different independents showing up in 2018. They rejected the Republican candidates, and my guess is that they were probably left-leaning independents. You described how the political landscape now is just so deeply divided into two factions. But in your article, you take us back to 1860, where the conditions were sharply similar. How so? Yeah, no, I can't actually understate how much trouble our political system is currently under, and this is pretty much ignored in the day-to-day of the news, which is just hard to keep up with the developments. But institutionally, we have the Congress, which is basically an institutional failure at this point. It had been in decline, and now it's in actual failure. And we see this executive branch really pushing out the bounds of the judiciary and the federal law enforcement agencies as well. So we really can't look back at a time period when the public was this divided, the parties were this divided, and our institutions were collapsing, other than that 1860, right before the Civil War time period.
So how exactly does the electorate's hyperpartisanship and their outlook really influence things like poll numbers?
So it has a massive influence in polls because polls have become remarkably inelastic. If you take into mind the impeachment process, right? When the Ukraine scandal emerged, a chunk of pure independents moved against Trump in favor of the impeachment inquiry and even in favor of his removal from office. But after that, the numbers never moved again throughout the entire impeachment trial in the House with all the evidence that was unveiled. And of course, the debacle that was the Senate trial with no evidence. So what we really see is this inelasticity in presidential approval numbers, in support for the parties, in support for impeachment, and it's just really entrenched.
Rachel Bitecofer, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.